name is Frank Mastromarro, and I freaking love comics.
Yo, my name is Donnie Cates, and I'm
Judah and Robo will not be attending this podcast. The females have taken over. Ainsley and Rhiannon today are going to talk about LGBT plus representation in comics. Stay tuned. Hey guys, welcome to the IFLC podcast. I have fired Judah and Robo, and today it's just me and one of the moderators, Ainsley. So today's a special episode. We're going to talk about LGBT plus representation in comics. So we're going to go from DC to Marvel to independent. And today I have with me Ainsley, one of the moderators from the Facebook pages. She is going to help me out in terms of presenting you with good and bad examples from each of those publishers. Ains, do you want to give yourself a small intro?
Hi, I'm Ainsley, and I am a gay comic fan, which means that I am a gay woman who likes comics, and I am also a fan of gay comics.
Well said. Love it. I am Rhiannon. I'm a she, her pronouns for me, but I identify as a pansexual polyamorous person, so I'm all into that representation. So we're both, queer buddies on the page. So Ains, I have a question for you for how we start. I'm wondering how you got into comic books to begin with.
Okay, so I grew up in the mid-90s. I'm almost 36, so I was right there in the heyday of the modern age. And my brother would get comics because he was a boy. I did not get comics because I was a girl. So I would sneak into his room and I would read his comics. And the very first comic that I ever read was The Death of Superman.
Yes.
Which at 9 years old, it's probably a little heavy. There's a lot that I wasn't able to appreciate, but there were elements of it that stuck with me forever. And one of those was, we'll jump right into the talking points, Maggie Sawyer.
Yes, Maggie Sawyer. Love it.
Maggie Sawyer was, I don't remember what her exact position was, but she was a high-ranking officer in the Metropolis Police Department, and she was an absolute force to be reckoned with. Even as a little kid with no comic experience, everybody knows Superman, and she would look Superman dead ass right in the eyes and tell him what for. And
nice.
That blew me away. That was so cool. And
That's a cool character.
She was a lesbian.
Awesome. In the 90s.
She was an out lesbian in comics in the 90s who wasn't a joke or throwaway character. And it would be years still before I really came to realize the impact that had on little kids.
Tiny Ains.
Yes, as I came into my sexual awakening.
Amazing.
There really aren't words to describe how important it was to me as a child to see this strong, capable, beautiful, ass-kicking woman who was gay.
Yes.
Because even before I had any inkling of sexuality, it was important to see, and it helped shape and impact my future.
That's amazing. What a great place to start. did everything disappoint you after that? Yeah.
This is why representation is so important in comics.
For sure. Absolutely. Because if you can't see yourself represented in the media that you're consuming, you feel like there's no place for you in society. So that's why I'm glad we're talking about this today. Hopefully we can give people recommendations if they haven't read stuff that we've read that we mention. Maybe that will open their library a bit and they'll get to experience some cool stories. But one of the ones I wanted to talk about, which might not necessarily be a good representation, is Harley and Ivy from DC. So I know you wanted to talk about the first gay marriage that DC ever had. Do you want to talk to that first?
I can. Talking to gay marriages. So, like I said, I wasn't really a fan of DC. It was Marvel that grabbed me and dragged me into their world and just really took over. Um,
Do you remember what the first Marvel comic was that you read?
Iron Man number 302. It was
amazing.
I think it was 302. It was Iron Man versus Venom.
Wow.
And Tony had lost the use of his legs, and Venom had decided that he was guilty of war crimes and broke into Stark Towers. And there's Tony as a quadriplegic or paraplegic trying to get through to his suit to save his own life. It was just, oh my God, it was so exciting and bright and colorful. And
wow.
Anyway, but Maggie Sawyer, I encountered again years and years and years and years later, because she is the woman who almost married Batwoman.
Oh, no shit.
Yes.
So
Yep,
what do you mean by almost? What happened with that?
Oh, so DC, and it cost them the crew that had originally been working on the Batwoman title. They, the artist and writer, both up and quit over it. But DC made the declaration that their characters aren't supposed to be happy and aren't allowed to be happy. No. So Kate dumped her.
No.
And
shit.
Yeah.
That's so awful. Yeah. See, that's so similar to the Harley and Ivy backlash, and that happened in 2016 or something. I think maybe even this year. I think the miniseries where they've been like saying that they're together, and obviously you've got all those comic skaters that are reading it and saying no, they're not in a relationship, even though they're clearly in a relationship. But then I think in like Feb this year or something, they had a miniseries, and it basically ended with Harley leaving Ivy so she'd been split into these separate personalities. She had a new plant body and a power boost from Luther, but she was like, oh, I can't go with you, I'm like too dangerous. And everyone was expecting them to have this like farewell kiss thing. Yeah. And it was like a kiss on the forehead. A kiss on the forehead. I know, it was so rough. Like, so they've had like artists reinterpret it. I know, artists reinterpret it since then where they're actually macking on. But like the panel that you see it looks so last minute. Like they just have this hug and Ivy's kissing Harley's forehead, and then she just like kind of leaves off. And I know that they've said, so some of the writers and stuff have said like they're non-monogamous, you know, they see other people, they're not you know, jealous of other relationships and stuff happening, which explained like different runs with Harley and Ivy having different relationships with different people. But it was so disappointing to see this like openly lesbian or gay relationship and then having it end so platonically. It's so heart-wrenching. So that was disappointing. That's my only qualm with it. And the whole, I don't know if you heard about this as well, but have you seen that Harley Quinn movie, the Emancipation one?
I have not.
Okay, so it's good. I liked it. But in 2019, when all the rumors and stuff were coming out, so LGBTNation.com did an article where they were like, Montoya is going to be played by Rosie Perez, and Montoya is like an openly lesbian character in the comics. And she'll be in a relationship with a woman played by Ali Wong, who's also amazing. And they're going to like kiss on screen, was the article, right? Never happened. There was no kiss. They did talk about like having been together and having split up in like this weird business meeting thing. They're like giving each other side glances, and then afterwards they have this awkward dialogue where she's like, what's up with you? Why are you throwing me under the bus? Are you drinking again? So like there is like tension and stuff, and you can see that they had like a long-term relationship before they split, but it's that same thing of like you don't actually see them together. Yeah. So they kept hyping up they were going to be like the first comic book movie to have a lesbian on-screen kiss, and it just never happened. So I don't know if it was on the cutting room floor but that would have been such a that would have been, imagine the reaction from like fans if they'd seen, like I would have queued up for the midnight screening for that if I knew that was the case. But it's just not, for some reason, still today in 2020 in MCU and the DCU, there's no on-screen gay relationships. Why do you think that is?
Money. Yeah. If
The masses.
if they do, it's got to be something that's easily edited out. It just is, to be able to get money from the countries that are even worse than the US about it. However, I do want to, I don't want to focus too much on like that. It's depressing, but I got to throw out there that Renee Montoya, who is the question, was in a relationship with Batwoman.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
Oh,
Kate gets around.
Do you know what series that was in? It's okay if you don't. I just want to check it out.
So, if I remember correctly, it. I don't remember if it kind of happened off screen or they showed it. I've got the entire series. I haven't gotten around to reading it yet. I know.
No, I'm saying I've got a backlog for days.
But she and Renee were in a relationship. It was brief, but they were in a relationship before either of them actually adopted their secret identities, but they know who the other are.
Yeah, right. Interesting. So is that like did they help each other out in terms of like crime fighting? Do they feed each other information and stuff, or?
They might do. Okay. But since the relationship happened before either of them got into crime fighting, I don't know if any of that happened. You know, Renee was a police officer.
Yep.
While they were dating, but Kate had not yet had her moment of epiphany.
Yep. Interesting. Yeah. So what do you think of Renee as a character? Because would you say that she's similar to Maggie Sawyer in terms of like being this strong law enforcement?
From what little I've seen, like I've said, and I'll probably say this a lot, I've never been big into DC, so there's not a lot that I've experienced. I'm really far behind the power curve, catching up a little bit. But from what little I know, yes, absolutely, fantastic character. She's well written. She's not, just there to be sexy or a wish fulfillment fantasy. And that's always really nice to see. And it's really good to see these gay women in positions of power and authority. Yes, I mean, it's great to see straight women in positions of power and authority. That's one of the reasons why, Emma Frost is my favorite woman character in any comic franchise ever.
Really? Amazing.
She is a boss ass bitch.
Yeah. What do you enjoy most about her? Just like her attitude and her, like, won't take no shit?
She's absolutely commanding. She wins no matter what. She always gets what she wants. And
nice. I love that.
And she was a fantastic villain, a great foil. I know that I'm kind of getting off topic here.
This is great.
We can count it as her being a queer icon, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
My favorite thing about Emma Frost as a character, and the thing that absolutely solidified her as my number one favorite woman character, was that she was this ruthless, conniving villain. I met her when she had her Hellions and she was enemy to the New Mutants, but she loved her children. And when they were killed in an assassination attempt on her, she never stopped carrying all of that with her, because they were her babies. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is such a...
before the last season. Like that was what I liked about Cersei so much, was like she was this ruthless, conniving bitch, and she had no qualms about it, but like her babies were number one. Her children were her biggest priority. Yeah, apart from Jaime, obviously, but we won't talk about that last season.
That's one of the things that I also love about male characters, is when they shouldn't be good with kids, but they are good with kids. And I'll talk about that when we get to Northstar.
Oh, I'm so excited for that. I can't wait. Yeah, spoiler. I love that. So you were going to tell me about Midnighter and Apollo. So were they the first gay marriage in comics or the first gay marriage in DC comics?
They were both. They married in, oh gosh, now I can't remember. I'm going to have to fact check this.
Yep.
I want to say 2007, but I could be making that up.
I'll see if
But
I
they
can
were
find it.
the first gay marriage in comic books,
Wow.
period. And not only did they get married, but they had a baby. So,
That's so
yes.
cute. So, what was the reaction like from the fans? Were people excited?
This was when the Authority was running was really before. I feel like it was really before the internet kind of went crazy with forums and responses and every generic asshole having an opinion. Me being one of those generic assholes, by the way. No offense to anyone. But also, I got to be honest, I did not read The Authority until last year. So again, like I said, you're going to hear this a lot. I'm not a DC fan. I'm not a DC person. I never was, but I made the mistake of telling a friend of mine once that I would read anything with Warren Ellis's name on it. You can give me a phone book, a technical manual written by Warren Ellis, and I'll sit there going, oh my God, this is amazing.
Amazing, though. He's such a genius. Are you still the same way?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's the only reason I watch Castlevania is because his name is stamped right on there.
Amazing. He's one of my favorites, too.
Oh yeah, he's incredible. So my friend uses this information against me and drops off an issue of The Authority, and I meet Midnighter.
Oh, and fall in love.
And about 3 panels later, I am in love with Midnighter.
Yes. July
so I go out and
is when they got married.
I went out and I bought every single issue I could find. I have almost the entire run of all 4 volumes, plus the Midnighter and Apollo miniseries, plus the both volumes of the Midnighter individual series, plus Grayson, because Midnighter is in it. Like,
I love
if Midnighter
that.
was in it, I bought it and I read it.
So, did you read the New 52 reboot where they wiped out their marriage?
I did. I did.
But they're still dating. What did you think of that?
So, everything that I've read of the New 52 was absolute garbage, including The Authority. And I kind of hope that Warren Ellis just throat punches someone over that series. It was terrible. But they got a couple things right. And one brief moment that I actually enjoyed was in one of the issues, Midnighter gets blown out into space and Apollo goes to rescue him. And he gets him, and he's got him in like this little environmental bubble, but it's running out, and they got to get back to the ship, or they're gonna die. And Midnighter looks at me and says, "God, you're so hot."
Yes.
And the others can hear us. What are you doing? And he says, "I'm the fucking Midnighter. I don't give a shit what they think."
Amazing.
Okay, they got to pass on that one.
Oh, that's so cute. I'll have to read more of their runs. So Midnighter as a character, what do you enjoy? So is it just the like straightforwardness or like the badassery or?
So I said that I was going to get to this with Northstar, but I'll start with Midnighter. Men who should not be good with children, but who are. So
nice.
Midnighter is, of course, the Batman allegory, and Apollo is the Superman allegory, because the actual writers for Batman and Superman were too cowardly to make them get together. So Warren Ellis just went ahead and did it anyway.
Made them together.
But Midnighter is so over the top, hyper violent, like it's vaudevillian almost. His hyper violence, the ridiculous things that he does in the Apollo and Midnighter miniseries, he headbutts a bullet through the brain of an actual like murder god. And,
that's amazing.
There's an issue where he gets shot at by a tank and kicks the tank artillery shell away. Like, it's just this absolute absurd ridiculousness, and I am 1000% here for it. And then so spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't read The Authority, it's been out for 20 years. You've had your chance. So one of the characters who carried over from Stormwatch into The Authority was Jenny Sparks. And Jenny Sparks is known as a Century Baby. And every time she dies, she gets reincarnated and embodies the spirit of that century.
Ooh.
So yeah, it's really cool, and her powers change to reflect the environment that she is going to grow up in. So it's a really cool concept, a really cool character. Every time you encounter her, you actually at one point get to meet all of the Jennies throughout antiquity, and it's really cool.
That's awesome.
Several of whom are gay, by the way.
Yes. What centuries were they?
So Jenny Sparks dies and, of course, is reborn. And the authority finds out who the new Jenny is, and it's this little baby being born in Korea. And it's this mad dash to get to her because somebody else has found out where the new Jenny is going to be, and they are going to kidnap her. So long story short, the authority ends up rescuing this baby, and Midnighter and Apollo take her and adopt her.
Oh, wow.
And they raise her as their little girl. And so here is this absolute psychopathic, terrifying, like bathes in blood guy who is a power bottom and a dedicated dad. Like, it's just, I absolutely love it.
That is amazing. I had no idea. So it's interesting you say that. We'll get to this in Marvel, but I wanted to talk about like Mystique as a parent because
yes.
I also kind of enjoy the reverse where like women are sort of societally expected to be, you know, motherly and, you know, good parents, and it's the exact reverse side of the coin that you were just talking about with men and, you know, not being good with kids. But Mystique is kind of an example of the complete opposite of that, where she has Nightcrawler, and then she and then she abandons him and, you know, like leaves, and he becomes Kurt Wagner with that gypsy sorceress chick, whatever her name is. But it's interesting when they explore characters that don't fit that gender normalcy, I suppose, when they sit outside. Yeah, it's really, really nice. So speaking of women and matriarchies, I want to talk about Wonder Woman because, and you were saying that you knew this, I had no idea that she was created by a male feminist who loved bondage and matriarchy and was polyamorous and invented a lie detector that apparently didn't work, but that was what the whole lasso of truth was based around. Like, what is this person? So the guy's name, William Moulton Marston, is that Professor?
Yeah, Professor Marston. And and there was a movie, actually. It was a biography of his life and the creation of this character. And it was called Professor Marston and the Wonder Women. And it was directed by Angela Robinson, who was one of only 2 Black women to ever write for DC Comics. And Angela Robinson is gay.
Oh, get out. So you know that from doing, for those that don't know or follow us on Facebook, Ains was very, very active on Black History Month. Every day you'd be posting a new creator or a new character for Black History Month, which is February, is that right?
Correct, yes.
Awesome. So if you want to go check out some of our previous posts from Ains, she's done heaps of research. I learnt so much in that month. I don't think I've learnt so much in 4 weeks in my life. So that was really fun. It was cool getting to figure out like when certain characters had started, what creators had created what. So if you're ever into any of that stuff, Ains and all the rest of our moderators actually are so knowledgeable. And it's such a joy for us to like get to learn from you and everybody else. But yeah, this dude was like such an eccentric. You've probably seen the movie. I haven't seen the movie, but
I haven't seen it yet. I haven't had the chance.
I have to watch it. Yeah, I have to download it. But so he had 8 nonfiction books, 3 degrees, 2 major inventions, 1 silent movie, and a volume of erotic Caesar fan fiction to his name. He was hired and fired from university gigs at an almost impressive rate. He married his childhood sweetheart, but he kept a long-term mistress in their home to raise the children. So he fathered children with both the mistress and the wife, and then I think they made up some dead husband story for his mistress so she wasn't judged in society. Because this guy was born, I'll have to find it again, but it was like 1893 or something this guy was born. So like he was like super old. You know what I mean? Like, that's way back when. And he had a unique background. His views on love, bondage, and the impending matriarchy all shaped this Amazon warrior character. But so did the women around him. They were suffragists and careerists who yearned for more than what they were given. And at least one of them was related to Margaret Sanger. So that's pretty exciting. But Wonder Woman's origin story starts with this castle outside Boston, the Molten Castle. And this is where Marston's mother grew up with her obscenely aristocratic family. One of them signed the Magna Carta, and it was only after she deigned to marry.
Oh my God! Wow.
Yeah, that little William came into the world. So he still had a true blue-blooded education. He went through Harvard 3 times. He picked up a bachelor's degree, I think like a PhD in psychology. And his wife attended, is it Mount Holyoke for undergrad and Boston University for a law degree. But back then they weren't hiring female lawyers. Yeah, I know, right? So like he was surrounded by smart women. It's got a quote that says, "Those dumb bunnies at Harvard wouldn't take women." So, I love so much. But so she eventually got 3 degrees to match her husband's set. And then because she couldn't find reliable work, they actually ended up being creators with Marston. So some of his they would have like threesomes and stuff, and they would sleep with other women. And some of those women ended up being like inkers for Wonder Woman and stuff back in the day when they were first creating her as a character. And
that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting the themes that they explore, because he, obviously being a psychology nut, he was into the idea of like exploring gender roles and why they exist and how they benefit or harm us. And he did this study on the men in one of his classes where he was like, would you rather be an unhappy master or a happy slave? And it was like much more to the former. Like majority of men that he was teaching would rather be an unhappy master back in those times. Yeah, it was nuts. And so he wanted to like try and get this female character that represented all these things that he thought society should be heading towards. But part of that, with the like lasso and stuff, the lasso of truth, and like her gauntlet things that she's got on, she would often be like tied up by antagonists in like the first iterations of her. And he talked a lot about like willingly submitting and that kind of stuff, and that's a power that women have too. And it was just an interesting, like, I guess, exploration of like women's roles in society, what they're expected to do, what they should be able to do. Wonder Woman, I think, is my favorite DC character, if we're talking like, yeah, favorite comic characters. I just think like Diana is so strong, and like I get that she's like similar to Superman in terms of like she can be pretty bland at times, but you know what I mean? Like,
you get that with anyone.
Yeah, that's true. Like there are definitely more interesting like Mystique is probably a more interesting female character, but I just love the power that you feel looking at her. And like I remember going to see Wonder Woman in the cinemas when it came out with Gal Gadot, and like watching that scene where she like walks across no man's land. And I know even then it's like she's doing it because she's in love with this guy, and that's kind of disappointing. But that whole scene where she's like finally accepting that that's the level of power that she's got is like so empowering to see as a woman. I don't know if you agree. Did you go and see it at the movies at all, or?
So I didn't, because I'm not a DC fan, but I will. I want to say that one of the best things about Wonder Woman is that a lot of times when someone tries to make, and of course they're almost always being written by men. So when a man tries to make a strong female character, she either becomes completely useless as soon as a man shows up on the scene, or she is a cold-hearted bitch.
Yep.
And there's like never any in between. And one of the things that Wonder Woman does and has always done, and I hope will always do, is she never has to sacrifice her warmth and femininity for brute strength. And she never has to give up that strength in order to be warm and loving and kind and affectionate. They feed on each other. And she is a very well-written, multifaceted character who, doesn't get shoved into one corner or the other. And I think that that's phenomenal. I think that's fantastic. And I think that Wonder Woman as a character deserves all of the accolades. There's a reason she's been around for, more than 80 years or whatever it is.
Yeah, and there's a reason that she holds her own against the other top two, right? Like Batman and Superman are also well-written, multifaceted characters. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I can see why. Yeah, they can be. Yeah, that's exactly it. It depends entirely on who's writing them, in my opinion. Like, I'm sure that there are iterations of Wonder Woman that Marston would have hated, because of what they'd done to her in terms of like there was one where she obviously dotes a lot on Steve Trevor, but there's other ones where she like relinquishes her powers. At one point she opened a boutique, so like that's not the kind of shit that he was going for when he created her as a character. But obviously it just depends on what writers you get, what creators, as to like the quality of the content in the story. But that brings us into Marvel, I think. So I want to hear what you think about your one true love, Northstar. So how did you get into Northstar? What's he all about? Tell me everything.
Okay, so every now and again, I will encounter a single panel that makes me fall irrevocably in love with a character. For Luke Cage, it was the issue of Heroes for Hire, where Dr. Doom stiffs him on like a $300 check, and he storms Doom's impregnable fortress, shoves him against the wall, and says, "Where's my money, honey?" And from that moment, it was love. And for Northstar, it was Alpha Flight number 113, where he and the rest of the team, they're fighting a bunch of goons. They're like this hockey-themed bunch of punching bags. And I just, so the panel is, he zips past one of them because, of course, Northstar's powers are flight, super speed, and he has light powers. Previously, only one he and his sister touched, but now he has them on all his own. But anyway, so he zips past this goon, and he goes, "Impossible! Nothing human can move that fast." And this brazen, ridiculous, amazing guy stops, goes full on Peter Pan pose, arms on his hips, and chin jutted up, and says, "I'm better than human. I'm French Canadian." And I was done. I was done.
Oh
it was love.
That's amazing. So has he been French Canadian through the entire that
So following that, much like with the Authority, I went out and I got every single bit of Alpha Flight I could get my grubby little hands on.
I love that.
And so he has always been French Canadian. He has always been gay. So Northstar's first appearance was in Uncanny X-Men number 120, which came out in 1979, April, I think. Don't quote me on that. And so Northstar also has the distinction of being the first comic book character ever to utter the words, "I am gay." That was 1992.
Amazing.
So his first appearance was 1979. He didn't come out until 1992, but John Byrne, who was the creator of Alpha Flight, went on record saying that he always intended for this character to be gay. He had an inkling when he was creating the team that one of them was gonna be. And when he got to Northstar, something just clicked, and he said, "That one, that's the one." But of course, because the Comics Code Authority, you couldn't do it. So throughout the entire series, leading up to number 106, which was the issue in question, he would put in little hints, little indicators. Yes. One of the biggest ones being, Northstar, Jean-Paul, has a twin sister, Jean-Marie, who was Aurora, and she had an on-again, off-again relationship with another member on the team, Sasquatch. And Sasquatch dies, and Aurora is just stricken, And Jean Paul is trying to comfort her because they're very close, and she yells at him and says, "What do you care? You hated him anyway." And notices that he is crying. And it was John Byrne's way of noting that Northstar was in love with Sasquatch and chose not to act on it because it would get in the way.
His sister.
Oh, yes,
God.
Just little things like
so
that.
Heart-wrenching. God, I've never read this character. I'm already so into his story arc.
They did a lot with him. There was a point in time where, and I couldn't tell you who the writer was. It wasn't Byrne anymore. But Northstar at one point gets sick. And nobody knows what this is. It's some mysterious disease, and they actually go up against this villain called Pestilence, who touches Northstar and feeds off of the sickness that's killing him. And it was originally intended to be AIDS.
Wow.
Yeah.
And was that in the 90s, that run, or?
Yeah, late 80s. It had to be late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah,
and it was squashed pretty quick because it was squashed pretty quick just because of how outrageously insensitive it was to everything that was going on. So they put the kiboshes on that pretty quick, and they turned it into this thing where he was dying because it was this lack of magic, because he was actually an elf, but then it just turns out that it was Loki trying to trick him, and they wrote themselves out of that hole, thank God.
Yep. So what relationships does he have moving, so he loves Sasquatch, but does he fall in love with someone following that?
Oh yeah, so it took a long time for him to actually get a requited romance that was on page. In the Marvel swimsuit magazines that came out, he gets featured, and I have them. He gets featured on a page with Hector, who was a later on a known gay character. In The Death of Hercules, Fall of an Avenger, at the funeral, a bunch of characters are standing around talking about their happy fun times, with Hercules being the thing that brought them all together. And Snowbird, who is one of John Paul's teammates, calls him out and says, don't you want to get on this? And he bolts. So it's implied that he slept with Hercules.
Yep.
And
wasn't there a run with Hercules and Wolverine, maybe an alternate reality one where they got together? Yeah. That was good. The
greatest lovers in history.
Yeah.
Hercules.
I love that panel. I'll have to.
Hercules will, if it doesn't move fast enough, he will sleep with it.
That sounds exactly like Deadpool, who I'll talk about in a minute. But you'll probably know the panel I'm talking about, the one where Wolvie is kind of holding up Hercules' leg, and they've just slayed this massive beast thing, and they're like, we declared our love for each other. Well, I'll try and get Robo to put it over the top, but it was so. I remember seeing that and being like, oh, just I don't think it was this universe. Wolvie, but wasn't sorry to derail us for a bit, but Wolverine's son, is it Draken? He's bisexual as well.
No,
okay.
You can't talk to me about him because one of Northstar's unrequited loves was Bobby Drake, Iceman. Oh my God, yes, he was so in love with Bobby. It was during the whole nurse, because he wasn't gay yet. And so this is the thing that it was 10 years before the whole Bobby, you're gay panel. And if you heard a strange noise when that issue came out, it was me screaming because there was nothing in the world that I wanted more than for Northstar and Iceman to get together. Absolutely nothing. I would have cut off my pinky to make it happen. And of course, 10 years later, anyway. But Bobby is a character that I've also been a fan of for a long time. He was the goofy kid of the group. He was the youngest of the original X-Men. He was the one that always kind of got brushed off as being, not serious enough, not mature enough, but he was so capable and so smart. Like, people always seem to forget that he was an accountant. He's a smart guy.
Yeah.
Yes. So people always forget that.
I did forget.
And nobody takes him seriously. And I always connected with him because he always seemed so lonely. Even when he was surrounded by people, none of them really took him seriously. And that had to just be crushing a lot.
Yeah, he was isolated. Yeah.
And so the reason you can't talk to me about Duggan is because it was around the time of Michael, maybe Rosenberg's X-Men run, which was horrible. I don't want to talk about that, but he did a one-shot called Winter's End, I think, in which it's set in the future. It starts in the future, and Duggan and Bobby are together.
Oh, wow.
In a relationship, and it turns out to be this hideous fib. Duggan has just been playing him all along to get what he wants and get what he needs to do this thing, and like he just crushes Bobby and breaks it. And I absolutely hate him, and I will hate him forever.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I think like even Logan ends up stabbing him or something, doesn't he? Like he ends up just taking him out himself, because he's so sick of his bullshit.
But they are. But they're doing something that I love when they do, even when it's temporary, and that is they're giving him a hero's arc.
Yeah.
Which even Sabretooth got it, and Juggernaut got one. On the subject of men who shouldn't be good with kids who are, Juggernaut with Carter Gazikanian was just amazing, and I loved it.
Oh, that's cute. Well, actually, talking about Sabretooth, so I was going to talk about Mystique, and she had a child with Sabretooth, Graydon Creed. Yeah, who was like no powers, just a normal human soul. Is that right? Like had no, and so she basically wanted nothing to do with him because she was like, well, you're not special, you're not a mutant. I might as well just leave you. So that was sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna. Doesn't he grow up to found the Purifiers?
Oh.
I'm pretty sure it was the Purifiers. He's a mutant hater, and he's horrible, and I hate him.
How would your reaction be, like, if that's your origin story and that's like how you're created, and you're basically said like abandoned by your own mother because you're not special enough? You'd probably end up being a little resentful, let's say. The other thing that I wanted to talk about, going back to, Aqualad, Jackson Hyde, is openly gay. Have you heard about that?
Oh, yeah, Aqualad. Yeah. At least in the cartoon show, I heard about that.
Nice. But going back to Mystique, so she's bisexual. Yes. But like me, great bisexuality, awesome. But like she is obviously a villain, so she uses it to her advantage. She morphs between, I think, so Chris Claremont saw Cockrum's design of Mystique, right, and dubbed the character name, and with Cockrum's position, he set her in Miss Marvel 16, which was May 1978, and then the character's true appearance was revealed in Miss Marvel 18, which was June 1978. But Claremont, who you've met, I think. You've met Claremont, right?
Yes, I have.
So I'm fangirling hard right now. But so he has said that he originally intended Mystique and Destiny Irene Adler to be Nightcrawler's biological parents, with Mystique having morphed into a Mallory, for conception. But Marvel, obviously at the time, didn't agree because the Comics Code Authority prohibited the portrayal of gay or bisexual characters. But her exact age remains unknown. Her earliest meeting with Destiny occurred around the dawn of the 20th century, is how it's described. But in the comics, she's had several children in the regular timeline and various alternate futures. So she's had Nightcrawler biologically, adopted and raised Rogue, had a child with Sabretooth. She even married Xavier at one point, I'm pretty sure. So she's kind of been all over the shop. But what I was saying to you before, I guess like it would be nice to see someone like, going back to DC, like, Batwoman, having like strong, healthy lesbian relationships instead of just seeing this like I'm manipulating, like similar to Wolvie's son, where it's like they're just using it to play people, to like get under people's skin. To I think like there was one point in the comics where Mystique is masquerading as Raven, gets married to Baron Christian Wagner or Count Eric Wagner, and he is a loving husband, but he's disappointing in the sack. So his infertility adds to their marital problems, right? And she starts using her shape-shifting ability to like have secret sexual encounters with other people. And then she's seduced by is it Azazel? Is that how you pronounce his name? The Nightcrawler's dad. So he has like the Island of Demons, and he has the power of immortality, and he's the father of an ancient race of mutants known as is it Neophim? So he's been around since like 2000 BC. He's like this crazy dude, and then she becomes pregnant, and she has so I think Mystique like murders him with a dagger and buries him, and then she gives birth to this baby with black hair, yellow eyes, blue skin, pointed tail, which is Nightcrawler. Yep.
And then too.
Yeah, and she was like, I'm out. She basically just abandons her son, and he doesn't go quite all the way that her other son does. Sorry, Graydon. But yeah, he definitely has personal issues. So it is cool to see. Yeah, it is cool to see. Like, I guess women not fulfilling the roles that society's deemed they should have, but it is like a little bit problematic that, and I feel this way with Deadpool as well. Let's move on to Deadpool. He's supposed to be pansexual, right? So I read this from theguardian.com. This quote made me laugh. The term bisexual would be too narrow for Deadpool, who has flirted with Thor, propositioned Spider-Man, and wouldn't rule out, say, unicorns. The pendulum moves in just two directions. He is more like a sexual swing ball, which is exactly how I describe him. He's just opportunist. He'll take whatever happens in the moment.
So my first encounter with Deadpool was during X Factor, when he was in love with Teresa Cassidy, when he was in love with Siren and trying to woo her. That was my first introduction to this character.
That's my issue, is like, even though he's been confirmed as pansexual by is it Jerry Duggan, I think, on Twitter, he's had some flirting in the comics, but he's never depicted as dating a guy. He's dated so many women. And he's like had a whole lot of girlfriends, and I know like none of them turn out very well. Some of them die, some of them dump him, some of them are evil, whatever. But it would be nice to see him in some actual gay relationships, or like with a man or with a non-binary person even, you know, like.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And that's a problem that I hesitate to call it a problem, because the fact of the matter is there are varying degrees, even with bisexuality and pansexuality, as to how much you are attracted to, you know, this side of the spectrum versus this side of the spectrum. And you see that also with John Constantine, who is bisexual, has been portrayed in at least one relationship with a man, like actually on panel, and has talked about it before, but shows a strong preference for women. Yep. And it could very easily be the same with Deadpool, but the problem with that is it sounds great on paper.
Yep.
But the fact that there has been so little representation in comics, and that it's still a struggle to get representation in comics, I feel like it's not as easy to get away with it in execution. So like I said, sounds good on paper that yes, he's pansexual, but he prefers women. But we're starving over here.
Yeah,
like we are.
It's the exact same thing as that
to actually
thing we were
see
talking
this.
about. Yeah, absolutely. With like the movie conversation we were having before, they'll do it if they can leave it on the cutting room floor. Like, it just seems to be this like cop out thing where they're like, oh, we'll say it so that we get like that crowd and market it. Yeah. But then it never actually eventuates to what you want to see, or the representation. Yeah, queer baiting. Yeah, exactly. So who else do we want to talk about in terms of Marvel? I was going to mention Loki and Angela in terms of gender identity. Yep, and Sarah, obviously. So you might not know this, our viewers might not know this, but at July's San Diego Comic-Con last year, Tessa Thompson, who plays Valkyrie in Thor Ragnarok, she said that she'll play Marvel's first explicitly LGBTQ character in Thor Love and Thunder. So yeah, which is super exciting. But in the film, supposedly Valkyrie is searching for a queen to rule at her side in New Asgard. Yeah,
I'm so ready.
Yeah, so ready for it. It's just, it feels so overdue. Like, I say this all the time when I went to go see Avengers Endgame, and tell me if you felt the same. That scene where everyone's coming through the portals and it's like that gratuitous shot of all the women, and I just turned to my sister as we're watching it. I'm like, look at all those women that aren't Avengers. Like, that's all I could think.
See, I was really excited to see all of the women in a single shot. Any progress is good progress, and yes, we want more. We want explicit. Give us an A-Force movie, you cowards! Just come on. But it was also, I really enjoyed it, and I know that it was in there exactly for me and for people to react the way that I did, which was, oh my God, it's all women.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I mean, I understand the thought behind it, but it just, at the time, it was almost similar to how I felt when I was watching Captain Marvel, when they had I'm Just a Girl playing in the fight scene, and I was just there like, ugh, you know what I mean? Like, it's
I got a name drop real quick. I was talking to John Tyler Christopher, who is my neighbor. He lives a couple blocks down. And he thought the same thing. We talked extensively about Captain Marvel, I think the last time I saw him. And he's like, oh, it's just too on the nose for me. Meanwhile, my best friend who went to see the movie with me, oh my God, that was probably her favorite scene in the whole movie. Like, she loved it. So you really...
Different strokes for different folks.
It doesn't appeal to everyone, but it's going to appeal to someone.
Yeah, whatever tickles your pickle. I guess, like, I'm probably more cynical as a person overall, and maybe that's why it doesn't. I enjoy, Constantine is probably one of my favorite male DC characters because of how flawed he is, and I talked about this on the last episode. I like seeing, people make mistakes and fuck up and like be human, because that to me is the most relatable thing. And Captain Marvel, I tried to read DeConnick's run before I went to go see the movie to get an idea of the character, and it's not that she's not flawed. She is. She's definitely arrogant and probably like distances herself from people a fair bit, as in she's not very vulnerable. She doesn't allow herself to be vulnerable. And maybe those are the flaws. But to me, that was like not enough. As I wanted her to have more to her than that. I didn't think she was as deep as I wanted her to be. But what do you think about her as a character? Do you like her? Do you?
Yeah, no, I like her as a character. I just want to take a quick second. I know that we're talking about her, but to just touch on what you said, like about Constantine, and the reason that you like him as his flaws is one of the things that makes a character is learning and consequences.
Yes.
I hate when there are no consequences for a character's actions and decisions, because then nothing happens. Nothing moves forward. Nothing changes.
There's no gravitas. Yeah, absolutely.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think that that's an excellent point. And that's part of why the characters that we love the most are the ones who struggle and have obvious flaws rather than being perfect, which is why Superman gets such a rap as being a boring character. But anyway, no, I do like her as a character. She's never been a favorite. I gotta be honest, I haven't read a whole lot with her in it. I have read significantly more of the Kamala Khan Miss Marvel, who is an absolutely phenomenal character.
I love that run. I think I've got, is it 9 volumes they're up to or something now with Miss Marvel?
I have the individual issues, so.
Yeah, nice. I collect volumes. I think Ains is more. Are you more a single issues kind of person? Yeah. You got to have it when it comes out.
So I'm trying to I can't even say that it's because I gotta have it when it comes out because I'm so far behind on my comics. I'm just an elitist snot who
Love
thinks
it.
that having individual issues makes me better.
Nice. I love that. I literally the only reason I get collected volumes is because Australia is so hard to get comic books in, and like I want to support like individual stores, but they only really sell you collected volumes. They really don't sell issues. Like there's maybe one or two in Queensland that sell singular issue comics,
Oh.
and it's just too hard to get. It's literally just logistics, but
Yeah,
I
I'm trying to move away from that mentality and get some more of the trades because the benefit to that is any of the tie-in issues that aren't necessarily part of the main title, they're going to go ahead and throw those in there.
yeah, like the free comic book
Not-
day stuff and all that. While we're talking about Kamala Khan, so everyone should read her run if you haven't already. She's a great character, but I also, at the same time, because I wanted to read like Women of Marvel, I read Spider-Gwen, which was amazing, and what was the other one? Squirrel Girl. So if you want any recommendations for like strong female characters that are well written and quite often written by women instead of men, there's some good places to start. But talking about Marvel and Loki, so I said this to you before. If you can just pretend to be shocked again for this episode, the casting call for MCU under the codename Jessica, July last year. The role is for an upcoming Marvel Studios project that's filming this year, probably next year, given all the pandemic BS. But they have specifically requested a trans woman actress of any ethnicity in her 20s and 30s. Yeah, that's the reaction I wanted. So everyone's saying it could be Sarah. So Sarah is Marvel's only non-shape-shifting active trans character, as far as I know. But Sarah is, how would you describe? I guess like in the comics, the 10th realm heaven was once connected to, is it Yggdrasil? I'm going to probably mispronounce all of these.
Oh no, that was right.
Amazing, thank you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the angels started a war against Asgard, and the Queen of the Angels seemingly killed Odin's daughter Aldrich, and so as punishment, Odin sealed off heaven from the other 9 realms, and the angels raised Angela in heaven, right?
Yes.
And then, so Angela and Sarah had a relationship. Is that correct? And like Sarah's soul was sort of bonded to?
Yeah, so something that was really so my experiences with Angela go from the 10th realm and then basically skip everything that she did with Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff in between all the way to Strike Force.
Nice. See, I've only really read Original Sin with her and Loki. After I read Agents of Asgard, his run there where he sort of transforms into a female. And you said he had a line in that where someone questioned him on it. And what did he say back? He can...
It was about him being able to change his shape, and he had changed into a woman, and he commented that, I can change into anything that I am.
Yeah.
And we had seen Loki as a woman before when he took over Sif's body and went on as Lady Loki. But this was Loki's own body changed. And it was the first time that I am aware of that he really touched on and took total ownership of his gender fluidity.
Yeah.
But I was going to say
you were
something
saying that
really
Odin...
interesting. Oh yeah, Odin totally acknowledges it. At one point, there's a panel where he says, "Loki, my child, who is both my son and daughter." I was like, yes.
Yeah. It's really fascinating, that whole exploration. And like even Original Sin, I know you haven't read, it's really good. The art is amazing. But Angela, so Thor and Loki find out about Angela and they basically bust her out, and then Angela sort of fights against the Asgardians with the angels, and Loki, which makes total sense, and Loki sides with them as a woman, and Thor has just like fought off a bunch of angels, I think, and is like really tired and not in his best shape or form, and Angela like smashes him, and Loki like goes to join her and says like, I'm going to be on the winning side, which is what he or he or she normally does. But it was fascinating seeing the dialogue between Angela and Femme Loki. Like, she was the exact same way. She's like calling her sister, and they would have like some interaction about his or her gender fluidity, and it was just cool to see it acknowledged. Yeah, like seeing that, like that's not switch necessarily, but like that is Loki. He is this complex, well-rounded being that encompasses those two things, like you said. Like that's why he can transform into her. But yeah, sorry to interrupt you. You were saying something cool.
Oh no, just you were talking about Angela and Sarah, and one of the things that you learn about the angels is that nothing gets done for free. Favors are a currency in their society. It's very manipulative, very backstabbing, very conniving. But through all of that, with all of these people being horrible people, by the way, they're all terrible.
Agreed.
Sarah ends up in trouble, and Angela goes to save her for free, for nothing, because she loves her. And it's unprecedented. It totally breaks all the rules. I am a sucker for forbidden love, so yes. Of course I just give me a spoon, yum yum yum, I'm gonna eat it up. And so I just like put the heart eyes on me from that moment forward with the two of them, and then
they have a tragic ending. Is that right? Between the two of them,
they do. Nobody dies, surprisingly, but that almost makes it worse because they acknowledge that Sarah has a path, a destiny that does not include Angela, and they go their separate ways. They voluntarily say goodbye to one another, and I'm pretty sure that there's still some pieces of my heart on the floor that I haven't vacuumed up yet.
See, I don't know which run it is that I'm looking at, but there were definitely some where like Angela has said I'm Sarah, so I don't know if like as a coping thing they have tried to make her embody parts of, and I've read some bits about like soul, obviously like in those realms you can kind of like do whatever you want in terms of like astral projection, and there's all kinds of weird stuff that's going on, but I'll have to do some more research on that and figure out. I wanted to get us talking about, if you're happy to move on, some of the newer characters in Marvel. So America Chavez is the second character to use the moniker Miss America after Madeline Joyce. She first appeared in Vengeance issue 1, which was September 2011, before starring in her own ongoing series America in March 2017 by writer Gabby Rivera. She is Marvel's first Latin American lesbian character to star in an ongoing series, so that's pretty exciting. I haven't read any of her series yet. Have you read any of America's stuff?
So, and aside from the whole, I'm not a DC fan, this is also something you'll hear from me a lot. I have the entire thing, but I haven't read it yet. Yeah. What I have read was Young Avengers. Young Avengers Volume 2 had Miss America in it, and it was my first encounter with this character, and again, it was love at first sight. She shows up. Loki is a child. He has killed himself and rebirthed himself as a young boy to try and break the cycle of constantly being the villain. He wants to be able to write his own future. But so America shows up, and his first reaction is abject terror, begging her not to hurt him. I'm like, I don't know who you are, but I love you. And she was just, she was a force. She was so fierce and fearless, and again, a little violent, and I kind of like that.
Yeah. So true. I'm the same.
She's just, this beautiful character. She was super strong. She kicked reality so hard that it broke apart in a star pattern and let her walk right through it. Oh God, she's so cool.
Oh yeah, so for those that don't know, America was raised by her mothers, Amalia and Elena Chavez, in the utopian parallel. which is a reality that is out of the time and in the presence of being known as the demiurge.
Yes.
So she maybe inherited or absorbed some of her superpowers from the demiurge's ambient magical presence. But basically, America was 6, and the utopian parallel was threatened by destruction. Her mothers sacrificed themselves to seal the black holes, which resulted in their particles being smeared across the multiverse itself. And so she wanted to prove herself as a hero. She knew that utopia didn't require salvation. She ran away from her home and her responsibilities, and she traveled across different realities. And eventually she adopted the moniker of Miss America and began acting as a superhero. But I think she's the youngest Avenger or something, right? Like Hawkeye was maybe like 20 and she's like 17 or something.
Yeah, it was funny because I read that she was supposed to be one of the older characters, but when they brought her in, Kate at that point I think is 21.
Wow.
Novar is 20. Billy and so here's, I just got to get in here. The demiurge that you talked about, the celestial entity that created the world that America was born in, the realm that she developed her powers from, the demiurge is actually the future consciousness of young Avenger teammate Billy. Catherine is Wiccan, who is also gay.
That's amazing.
Yep. Billy eventually becomes one with the universe and becomes the demiurge and rewrites the entire universe of magic as we know it, but not for a while. Right now, he's still a kid. But as I'm saying, even he and his boyfriend and now fiance, Teddy,
is Teddy Howard as well?
Yes, he is. He is half Kree, half Skrull.
Ooh, that's fascinating. Yes, who are his parents?
I do not remember his parents' names, but the idea was to bring the Kree and the Skrull together and end the war. A Kree and a Skrull had a baby, and it's here we go, the unification of both races. And
saga, good stuff.
In Young Avengers Volume 1, we actually get to see the Kree and the Skrull fighting over this, and Super Skrull, longtime villain, big nasty, always been evil, gives his life. He sacrifices himself to save his prince.
Wow.
In that,
that's incredible.
Yeah, it was a really cool moment. It was really neat.
What a
he is the main focus of the upcoming, or what was upcoming, we don't know anything about it at this point as far as release schedules go, Empire event.
Fascinating. Actually, yes. I meant to ask you back when we were on DC, I guess like it sort of applies to the I don't know if you've been reading the X-Men runs, the new X-Men runs.
Yes, I'm a little behind, but I have been reading them, especially Marauders, which has just been unbelievable. It's so good.
Yeah, nice. I'm wondering what you think about, so we talked about this on the last episode, if anyone wants to go watch it in detail, but DC, they're rumored to have this 5G or 5th generation launch where they're replacing a lot of older characters like Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent with some other, well, mostly people of color, it seems to be rumored. Like we've got Luke Fox replacing Batman, who's Lucius Fox's kid. I can't remember who's replacing Superman, but there's like they're basically going from like one end of the spectrum to the other in terms of all white male roster to all black characters or female characters replacing. So I'm wondering what you think about like that reboot that DC's doing, because they try, obviously, like you were one of many that did not appreciate New 52. Did you enjoy any rebirth stuff? I know you're not a super DC fan, but would you see 5G as like a jumping on point potentially for you, or?
It might, and I will say, as far as rebirth goes, I believe that's where Red Hood and the Outlaws came from, was as part of the rebirth line, and oh God, like Jason Todd is such a good character.
Yeah.
And oh my God, I eat him and Bizarro and Artemis up. Just like, give me a straw. Um, yes.
Love it. That's so cute.
I love the idea. It's ambitious, but it's also risky because, of course, you're gonna have
Backlash.
these racist white neckbeards sitting in their basements, flailing their arms and gnashing their teeth over it. But like I said earlier, representation is vital. It's important. I mean, it literally saves lives. And I love the idea. Give me something new. Give me something fresh. Give me something that I haven't seen before. Superman has been around for like 100 years. There's only so much that you can do with him. I'm bored.
Yes,
I'm bored.
so true.
I'm bored.
Yeah.
It's
exact same with
Batman
origin
is
stories.
the same.
Yep. We've seen enough.
And again, I'm actually reading The Batman's Grave right now because it's being written by Warren Ellis.
Nice.
Because you can put it on and I'll read it. But how do you get a fresh take with a character that's been around? I also love the idea of legacy characters, especially when you didn't expect legacy characters. Ironheart is a great example.
Yes.
I mean, you kind of sort of had something like that with Rhodey when you had War Machine. And, I enjoyed that too. But then here's this kid who comes along. She's 14. She's a genius. She figures it out.
Yep.
I love it. It's something new. It's something fresh. It's something inclusive. It's something we haven't seen. We haven't seen Iron Man as, a 14-year-old Black girl before. So here she is. Yeah. Oh my God. Are you kidding me? This is amazing.
Speaking of things that I have never seen before, you said you wanted to talk about Shatty Buns. I have no idea. I have no idea what this character is or like what they do. Can you please? I've just been dying ever since we started talking about this episode a few weeks ago. I've been like, what? I've like refrained from looking things up because I want you to tell me so I can like, what kind of name is Shatty Buns?
So the character is Shatterstar.
Okay.
So Shatterstar was introduced in the penultimate the penultimate issue of New Mutants.
Yeah.
And carried over, and he was one of the founding members of Cable's X-Force team.
Right.
He comes from a parallel future in Mojo World, and he is trying to fix the future because it's horrible. The arenas are terrible, and he's part of the resistance group that wants to overthrow it and free everyone. And Cable essentially cuts him a deal and says, "You help me, I'll help you." And it's a great relationship from that moment on. He gets the name Shatty Buns from a teammate. She is kind of like a lycanthropic character. Well, I can't really say that because she doesn't shift back into human. So she's like a catcall. And she has a huge crush on him and calls him Shatty Buns. And I thought I was going to pee myself the first time I saw that. So Shatterstar, if Northstar is my number one favorite character, Shatterstar is probably my second. He's another character. He didn't have just one panel that really blew me away, but there was something about this character that I glommed onto the moment that I saw him.
Nice.
I just thought he looked so cool. Please don't actually look up his 1990s Rob Liefeld character design. Please, I'm begging you. It didn't age well, but he was just this really kick-ass character, and one of the fun things about him was because he was from this alternate future, this alternate world, he struggled with colloquialisms and idioms, and was always getting turns of phrase wrong.
Yes,
and
just like
it was just one of those things because he's like this super serious character who ends up saying these things that are very silly, and his teammates always kind of gently remind him. But he ends up making very fast friends with a young Julio Richter. I think in issue 18 of X-Force. Richter kind of has a rocky start. He's another character that's near and dear to my heart. He's one of the first characters that I encountered with depression,
Wow.
which does not get showcased very often. He has suicidal ideation. Like he almost commits suicide at one point. So it was a big deal. And he and Julio just take to each other right away. They're inseparable. They're the best of friends. So painfully, obviously in love with each other. There was, I'd have to look it up again, but there was an issue of Cable. It was a tie-in to the regular series. So Richter's family back in Guadalajara are actually criminals. He comes from a crime family. They're like gun runners, and his father is murdered, and I think is the story. And he is going back to get it sorted, and Shatterstar goes with him to the airport and is just absolutely devastated. There's this panel of him just with this sad, forlorn face, and he says, "One last time, I'm asking you, please don't go. What am I going to do without you?" And I'm like, but it took 18 years.
Whoa.
18 years from the first appearance of Shatterstar in New Mutants number 99 to, oh God, I couldn't tell you the issue number, Peter David's run of X Factor investigations, I think it was, for them to actually finally kiss. You wanted to talk about, you touched on this with Mystique and Deadpool, and some not really great portrayals of certain sexual aspects. And Peter David's take on Shatterstar as a character coming into his sexual awakening was so bad. I don't know if Peter David actually knows any gay people or poly people, but if he does,
was
he
it
didn't
clunky like I am like it was it that kind of cishet writing?
It was a little embarrassing to read, and clunky is a very good word for it. So Shatterstar's origin, he was, God, his origin is messed up, but I'll try to make this as simple as I can. He was genetically engineered to be the greatest warrior on Mojo World. Okay. He historically, at this point, didn't have any relationships because he was bred to be a warrior. Like, his only job was to fight and to kill. And he had a wife, actually, someone who had been pre-selected to be his genetic mate because their DNA would have resulted in optimal offspring. So he had a wife that he never met.
Wow. That
so there was
very
no
Hitler-esque. Yeah.
But so he's obviously, if you read X-Force, he's been in love with Richter for a long time. And he shows up and they kiss, and then he basically immediately starts going after other people too. And Richter actually calls him on it at one point and says, "What are we? What's going on here?" And the reasoning given was that this was all so new to him, and he had to experiment and find out who he was, but he needed Julio to be his anchor, and that's not polyamory. That's not a healthy relationship. That's locking someone who is monogamous into a one-sided open relation.
That's my biggest issue.
So bad. It was so unhealthy.
Yeah, and you just hit the nail on the head with the polyamory portrayal. Is so often it's used as like a plot device to villainize someone. And in reality, polyamory is like ethical non-monogamy. Before you get into any relationships with people, you are upfront. Ideally, this is my version of it. You say, "This is the kind of person that I am. This is how I love people. Are you okay with this kind of setup?" It's not that I haven't heard of people being in relationships where one person's monogamous and one person's polyamorous and they're happy, but that's so often not the case. And what we see in these portrayals, it's often like they're being unfaithful, or like they're exactly what you just said, they're shoehorning someone that's monogamous into this position where they're uncomfortable. And that's what makes me so angry, is like that it's like a villainous portrayal constantly of of polyamory, which is not, I feel, accurate. But yeah, you just, sorry,
Yeah, it
just
was
to
not good.
touch on.
Oh
Yeah.
no, you're fine. But yeah, it was not good, and that's why I loved Tim Seeley. Oh my God, who I is just absolutely incredible. Um, uh, Tim Seeley did a Shatterstar miniseries at the end of 2018 and 2019, um, where he basically ignores pretty much everything that Peter David did to these two characters, except for acknowledging that they were together and then they broke up. And he handles it so beautifully, really, really well.
Wow.
It is a relatively recent series, and it's only 5 issues. You can probably get it in a trade, but I don't want to talk too much about it because I don't want to spoil it. It was so good. It was just, it was so well written. It was well paced. It was full of action. It had Shatterstar delivering one of the greatest lines I have ever seen in a comic book ever. I am going to spoil this a little bit. I'm not going to tell you who he's talking to, but he's talking to this one character who is, you know, omnipotent in this realm. And Shatterstar just looks him dead in the eyes and says, "Do as gods do and be silent," and turns and walks away from him. I'm like, oh, I'm so at this comic book reading this line. And it was just, oh my God, like my balls grew 3 sizes that day.
What a badass. That's amazing. I love that. Here's a weird question for you. And like, tell me to shut up if you disagree with it. But I'm wondering because, okay, as I was growing up, there was really no portrayal of healthy polyamorous relationships, pretty much the same as how there was no healthy portrayals of, like, basically my first experience with a lesbian relationship on screen was Buffy with Willow and whatever her girlfriend's name was. I can't remember. Tara.
Tara.
Yeah. So they, there's this theory on the internet, and you've probably seen it, where like Scooby-Doo is supposed to be like a 4-way polyamorous relationship, which I really love. And I genuinely read, there's this really good series that's out, I think it's running at the moment, Scooby-Doo Apocalypse, where it's like exactly what it sounds like. It's a Scooby gang going through like zombies and stuff, and it's awesome because they're all like badass and they're still in their colors and stuff, but they like got, you know, baseball bats, and it's amazing. Anyway, I would love to read, because there was also a theory with Sarah Michelle Gellar at the time when she was doing Buffy. She was also filming the Scooby-Doo movies, and they were originally supposed to be, from what I've heard from all accounts, like darker. They're all supposed to be like stoners in the van, and she was like, well, I've got a really young audience from Buffy and I don't want to be setting that example. So it went the more light, happy Disney route. But I'm wondering, my question is, after all that massive spiel, is, are there any characters that aren't out as gay that you would like to see as gay, or gender non-fluid, or non-binary, or any of the above, where they don't fit into that, you know, typical cishet category?
Oh yeah. First of all, I want to touch on something really recent. I have never liked Cyclops. I will never like Cyclops. But I would punch any 3 strangers on the street for Hickman to go full on with this sort of hinted Jean, Scott, Logan polytriad. Like I am so here for it.
That would be really interesting. Because that
girl,
dynamics
get
are
some, like, do it.
Yes. Because like that's the other thing too. So often polytriads are 2 women and a man. So it would be so great to see, and they're all so different in terms of like the characters that they are. It would be so cool to see how they make that work.
Yes, I want it. It wouldn't be enough for me to like Cyclops, like actively like him, but I might hate him a little less. He would definitely be a more interesting character to me if they did this. But going back to name dropping with John Tyler, when Bobby got outed, it was a big deal. for a lot of reasons. And we talked about this, and he told me that he didn't like it. I'm like, why not? And he said, it should have been Warren. And I'm like, son of a bitch. So I don't know how many of you out there have read 1602. It was an alternate universe X-Men story written by Neil Gaiman. It was so good. And it's been out for a while. So again, spoilers coming up. Sorry. But Jean, being the only girl in the group, as they're going around to help protect her, has disguised herself as a boy and is going by Master John Grey. And Angel is the last person to end up in this group, and he spends an awful lot of time with Master John Grey, so much that Scott is super jealous and is just an absolute prick and treats him like garbage and is always picking fights. And Jean dies, and they're burying her, and Warren is inconsolable. He is absolutely stricken. And Scott, being the absolute dick that he is, starts a fight with Warren about it. And I don't remember if he calls her Jean or if he says she, and Warren just kind of, and Scott realizes and says, you didn't know. Warren had fallen in love with John. So we had precedent for, there is another version of Warren who is at least capable of falling in love with guys, either exclusively or in addition to. So I would love to see Warren explored in that vein a little bit more.
That would be amazing. I love that answer. So, Ainsley, are you ready to talk about indie comics?
I am ready to listen about indie comics because this is something that you have immeasurably more experience with than I do.
It's funny. I feel
you are like our indie queen, and I bow to you.
That is so gratifying to hear from a Marvel expert, because I'm sitting here like, there's so much I haven't read in terms of Marvel, and I know I'm going to walk away from this episode with a reading list about as long as I am tall. So I'm looking forward to it.
For the same things because Rhi, I would love for you to tell me a little something about a title that I've heard good things about. Yeah. I don't know a lot about it though, so please inundate me with information about Lumberjanes.
All right, so Lumberjanes is by Boom Studios, and it's written by Nimona author Noelle Stevenson. So Nimona was her webcomic series that she began with, and she eventually had that published into a paperback. And I'd also recommend reading that if you want to get an idea of style and her sort of, it's almost similar to Giant Days, which I'll talk about in a moment. It's very feels hand-drawn and sketched because she made that herself. But Lumberjanes, the reason that it's interesting to me is in issue 17, Jo comes out as trans, and it's so awesome. So Jo is one of the central characters. It's basically, it's like Girl Scouts. They're camped together, and I've actually got a quote here somewhere. Lumberjanes, this is from the Russian writers, I think. She's got a double T. But she says, Lumberjanes is the ideal, right? We write Lumberjanes like it's somewhere we wish existed, all while hoping that maybe the mere fact of its existence in fiction might make it easier and better for some humans who live in the real world. So we wanted this moment of Jo's to be portrayed honestly and truthfully and positively, and to perhaps make the journey in this scary real world of ours slightly easier for a young person going through it there right now. So Jo is someone with a loving family, a rock-solid best friend, and a group of close pals who are there for her no matter what. She's a lumberjane. And I hope that seeing oneself in her makes it slightly easier for someone out there to be okay with themselves and the scarier parts of being a queer kid. Because she basically just sort of, they have this camp across the way that's all boys. And one of the boys wants to be a lumberjane. And so Joe says basically like, I think I'm similar to you. And that's where Joe sort of comes out as a trans girl, because up until this point, you know she's a girl, but you don't know that she's trans. So she's basically saying like anyone can be a lumberjane if they have that spirit. And this boy is like a lumberjane. He becomes part of the roster with the rest of them, even though he identifies as male. So it's like this cool ideal world. It kind of reminds me of if you've ever seen Parks and Recreation with is it Amy Schumer? Is that the lead in that? Yeah, where she makes her little girl guide clan, and they end up like bringing the boys and girls together, and they all just like play and have fun. It's kind of like that really idealized world where it's like there's magic and they go on adventures and they like fight monsters and things and solve puzzles, but also in amongst that, the real core of it is being there for each other and being friends with each other and, you know, supporting each other through thick and thin. So I would super recommend it. It's a really heartwarming series. The art is fantastic. It kind of feels like a sketch you'd make beside a log fire type thing, you know, like it's very homely and very like muted colors, and like it's just really beautifully done. So I would super recommend. Yeah, it's really sweet. It's really, really nice. The other trans representation I wanted to talk about in indie is with Bitch Planet, which is a series by DeConnick, that same author that did the Captain Marvel series, most recent. And so she's written this. It's a sci-fi adult series. So Kelly Sue DeConnick, she wrote Pretty Deadly Captain Marvel, art by Valentine DeLandro, who did X Factor, Shadow Man, and the colorist Kelly Fitzpatrick from the Black Hood and DC Comics Bombshells. But yeah, yeah, so it's a very beautifully done comic. But in issue 8, they had 4 credited consultants, 3 of whom are trans women, who are helping DeConnick with her depiction of the new trans characters being added to the cast. So yeah, I know, right? So
yes, ask the source.
Any writers take note, like if you feel like you don't have the experience in the characters that you're writing, bring on consultants. Ask some people. I tried to do the same for our episode today, and I might talk about it in our next episode where we talk about more towards polyamory and sexual diversity, that kind of stuff. But what I tried to do in the lead up to this episode was message POC cosplayers who were either gender fluid or you know, sexually diverse, to try and get their opinion on representation, because Ainsley and I are both white. You know, like we can't talk to black representation in comics because we don't understand it. Genuinely, we don't. And we can say that, I think, you as a gay woman and myself as like a pansexual person, when we're looking at representation, you can see when it's done by someone, like you were talking before about that clunky, you know, coming out example where it's like, this person has never spoken to a gay person in their life. Like it comes across if you don't get that information. So in this, you can genuinely tell she reached out to Aria Aaron, Emma Huboy, I think, Mayvel Devia Rude. Sorry if I've mispronounced any of those, for assistance, explaining that because trans experiences are so rarely seen in our culture, she and DeLandro want to hear from real people who are living that experience and can inform their creative choices. She also had a violin teacher, because she's talking about like a violin scene in there as well, so she consults for everything. But the comics detail this land where gender non-conforming women or sexually non-conforming women, they get put in this bitch planet, which is like a facility for non-conforming women. And they, in that issue, they introduce the trans women inmates of Auxiliary Compliance Outpost Facility 1. So they have like this shower scene where you kind of see like there's lots of nudity and stuff in this series. It is for adults. But yeah, I know, right? Hey, it's a selling point. But Bitch Planet, it's found a way to make each individual chapter this valuable, satisfying purchase. It includes like loads of back matter that enlighten the main story, but also has like essays on the treatment of like Black bodies and Black identity in contemporary culture, trans representation. It's got like an interview with the creator of the Feminist Sticker Club, a reading list of trans positive books, multiple pages of letters from readers. So they try and like, it's a thoughtful, comprehensive resource that uses the story as like a launch pad to explore how those themes tie into the world off page, and they educate readers so that every time you go to Bitch Planet, you learn some shit. Like, it's not just cool badass chicks that are fighting each other in the prison dome. It's like there's genuine life lessons and relationships and stuff in there that you want to learn more about. So that is also a really great read. One that I mentioned before that you might have heard of as well is Giant Days. So I got this information off queercomicsdatabase.com. It's from 2015 it started, but it also started as a webcomic written by a man about a bunch of women, but it's one of the ones that's done well. So it features teen drug and alcohol use, depictions of people being given drugs without their knowledge or consent. It's not sexually explicit, but it does make a number of sex jokes. So it touches on all kinds of controversial topics that people might experience when they're going to university, because it's university or college-aged girls experiencing things for the first time in that environment. And there is a lesbian in that group who is also, I think, like, she's, I'm trying to think of the correct term here, Ainsley, maybe you can help me. So she's asexual, but she's romantically into it. Yeah. So she doesn't like the idea of sex. Oh, sorry, say that again.
Asexual, but homo-romantic.
That's it. Thank you. That's what I'm after. Yeah. So that's the kind of character we're talking about. It's really good representation, I feel, because she doesn't fit in that normal lesbian slot where she's like, you know, constantly, I guess, like about sleeping beside or kissing or whatever. It's more about the connection that she feels with them communicating verbally. Like that's her biggest thing. She wants to have these conversations with people, and she's super smart. I'm sorry, I don't remember the character's name at the top of my head, but I would recommend reading it. Bingo Love by Image is a story about two women that meet at church bingo in 1963, and they fall in love at first sight. This is another Image title, but they are forced apart by their families and society, and then they marry young men and have families because that's what you're expected to do. And decades later, in their mid-60s, they reunite again at a church bingo hall, and they realize that they still love each other. And they, as grandmothers, like get together and come out to everybody. And yeah, it's amazing. It actually, I don't know if you've seen this, Ainsley. There's a trailer for a Netflix show at the moment about a really, have you seen it? Like
A League of Their Own. So I am ready to cry my own body weight's worth of tears over this this Netflix special about those two women from A League of Their Own. I'm a big girl, so I am prepared to cry a lot over this. Yeah. I'm very excited.
I think I cried at the trailer. I was watching the trailer, and I think I got it on Facebook. They basically like served it up to me as an ad, and I was like, I am 100%, because it is almost exactly the same type of story, except they didn't have the separation. Obviously, they've been together their entire lives. They said they've been together over 60 years or something ridiculous. So I can't wait to watch that. For anyone that doesn't know about it, check out Netflix. It should be like this month, I'm imagining, if they've started advertising it now. But another one that you might like, Ainsley, so this one's about an all-boys school. It's called The Backstages by Boom Studios. And
I've heard good things. Yeah.
It's kind of akin to Lumberjanes, but like a sort of more boys type version, I guess. So they go to St. Genesius as a school, and this guy, Jory, he transfers in and he joins the stage crew to make some friends. And he thought he was just going to be like, you know, doing fetching props and like getting splinters and all that stuff. But what happens is there's a door backstage that leads to different worlds, and all the stagehands know about it. So they go on these adventures together, like through this alternate universe thing. And a lot of them are either queer or gay or questioning or gender non-conforming or non-binary. So there's like a whole vast range of representation across those characters, and they're all just
Oh my
friends.
God.
Similar
Sign me
things to
up.
look at.
I was actually part of the tech crew in theater when I was in high school back in the day. So that has a particular appeal to me. And yeah, everyone there was queer.
I love that. That's so great. The other one I wanted to talk to you about, which you may have read some of, is so Jughead is probably one of the few asexual characters that I've seen in comics.
He's the only one that I know. Do you know of any others? I don't know of any other character in comics that is portrayed and not just like Shan Koyman from New Mutants, who is a lesbian who in the entirety of her comic book existence has never had a girlfriend, at least that I'm aware of. So could be asexual, but like the only character that I know that is confirmed asexual is Jughead.
Yes. So I know there was some uproar around, and even the guy that I can't remember the actor's name that plays him in Riverdale. They basically erased his identity in that show, and he was really pissed off about it, and so were a lot of people that were watching it because they wanted that representation from the comics. I guess it's the same thing that you and I again were talking about, where it's so hard to get that on film if you want to appeal to a mass audience, but I still don't understand why it seems to be so progressive in so many other ways, that show. I don't really understand why they chose to take that part of Jughead away. I know like it's only been one iteration or something of him that's been asexual, but like you could see from the reaction from people that it was something they desperately wanted, like, yes, we finally have some representation.
And then nobody does that because and you'll get the arguments of, oh well, sex sells and blah blah blah. Like, you have 50 other characters, you're not going to have any problems with that. But
That's exactly it.
There is this weird mentality regarding sexuality and the absence of it. Like, there are people who, I don't know, like take it personally. Like the idea that someone couldn't be attracted to another person just bothers. I don't know why. So
that's the same thing with homophobia.
But that is why I vociferously and violently will protect the presence of that little A at the end of our acronyms and everything like that, because if anyone ever doubts that aces and aros belong to the community, just look at how they are treated by cishet people. It's just a phase, you haven't found the right person. And that is something that I've really appreciated seeing handled in Archie comics of all things with Jughead is them saying, no, this is okay, and this is normal, and there's nothing wrong with him, and there's nothing wrong with the other. Like, the one shining beacon of positive representation for it.
I agree. I'm so on board with. It would be nice if they even like had, because they're all supposed to be teenagers in Riverdale. Like, maybe he's still making that discovery. Like, they could still there's still opportunity for them to say he's asexual. You know what I mean? Like, I've just figured out I'm asexual. So
on that, there are a lot of people who don't realize it until much later in life, especially because there is so much focus in society on having sexual relationships and
having relationships in general. It's
I
agree. There's still so much focus around that nuclear family. Everyone thinks it should be mother, father, 2 kids, white picket fence, but think of how many variations are outside of that in the real world. You've got single mothers, you've got single fathers, you've got gay parents, you've got step families, you've got like in my family personally, you're probably the same. I've got 3 siblings that are to a different dad. So I feel like most people these days, it's some sort of mixed jumble of things, and that thinking flows down to it's fucked with my head too. I'm sure it's fucked with yours as well, and everybody, where you think if you're not in a romantic relationship or a sexual relationship, you're not complete, which is complete bullshit. When I look at most of the people that I look up to personally in my life, they're women over 60 that live alone. Like they're living their best lives, like knitting, sewing, they've got a dog. Like that's the kind of thing that I aspire to become, because like they're not answering to anyone's bullshit, they're not cleaning up after anyone, they're just living their lives how they want to live. And
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why that's not portrayed as like a dream or a goal in media.
I don't know either. And the thing is, like, even for people who aren't asexual, I'm not asexual, but I can identify with Jughead, because I'll tell you what, good God, there are so many times when I would just rather have a cheeseburger than a girlfriend.
Yes. So complicated. That's exactly it. Like sometimes, and the thing is too, like people, I've had this as well, I'm sure like lots of people can relate. I have trouble being alone with myself at times, because I haven't, like there's that reinforced messaging that's always like, be around other people, and it's something I think lots of people lack, is that self-acceptance, or that lack of conditional self-esteem that comes with having a relationship and a career and all the things that you're supposed to tick off in that weird checklist that society gives you. It's the same with asexuals. I feel like it's like, how difficult must that be to explain that to people? And then exactly the same, like I had it in high school, maybe you had a similar experience, where I came out to my best friend. I said, I think I like girls as well as boys. And she said, it's just a phase.
Wow.
That was my best friend, like that was the first person I ever told. Imagine being asexual and having that reaction back, like, oh, you just haven't found the right person or whatever. It would be so frustrating. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, and Jughead, there's a lot that I know about a number of characters who are part of the community that I haven't read the comics of, because I've done extensive research on them. In June, which is LGBT month, I do the same thing, and I actually ended up doing, we talked earlier about my Black History Month posts. I did that as a request from a Black member of another comic group that I am part of, who saw what I was doing in June. In June, I post exclusively LGBT content involving characters and creators. And he asked if I would do the same thing for Black History. And I said, absolutely. And so I did.
Sure.
So for June last year, when I did this, I got to learn a lot about a lot of characters that I otherwise didn't really have access to and hadn't encountered before. And Jughead was one of them. And there was, in my search for pictures that I could post, there was this panel where, he's dealing with exactly that, with people not understanding that he just doesn't feel the way that other people do about people. And that it doesn't mean that he doesn't like them. It just means, that he doesn't want to date them. He ends up going out with this girl because she dressed like a giant cheeseburger.
I love that.
So I would absolutely love to see more of that, more representation in that. Quinn, which I referenced earlier, who is a lesbian but has never been in a relationship that I've seen in the comics, and I could be wrong. If I am, I hope that someone corrects me and tells me what issue so I can go look. But I would love for them to just blatantly come out and say she's lesbian, but she's asexual. She's not interested, or she is a romantic, and that's why she hasn't been in a relationship. Give us something on that ace-aro spectrum that explains why we haven't seen her with a girlfriend, rather than just, we didn't give her a girlfriend because she's gay and we don't want to write another homo relationship. It would expand on her character. It would give more representation. It would give the people like me who are wondering, like, what's up with this? It would give us some closure. Like, there's literally nothing that couldn't go wrong with them coming out and putting her on the ace-aro spectrum.
Yeah. You mentioned Sarah Rainmaker, Gen 13 to me before. Can you tell me more about that side?
Yeah, absolutely. So
up some Instagram replies that we were talking about before from POC people, but yeah, I'm listening.
So again, in the 90s, in my comic book awakening, I discovered Gen 13, which was a total knockoff of Generation X and some of the X-Men and New Mutants characters. But it was bright, it was colorful. I was young and I didn't know better than to like J. Scott Campbell's artwork. Sorry. It's yeah. Anyway, so I ended up reading this comic, and it. Gen 13 might have actually, aside from Death of Superman with Maggie Sawyer, I think that Gen 13 was the first comic I read that had a gay character in it. And she is a member of the Apache Nation.
Wow.
And she has weather control powers.
Yep.
She can fly on thermal updrafts. And she was, so the thing that I found really interesting about her character is she was a pacifist. So here is this person who was supposed to be an ass-kicking superhero, and she really could be. She was a gifted fighter. She was incredibly powerful. Her weather control abilities were so strong. And not only that, but she had a natural affinity for water. It was almost to the point of hydrokinesis. Like she could almost just talk to water and tell it what to do. And aside from her gen active powers, she had this Apache mysticism that she could contact the spirit world. And so she was just like this really powerful character, really, really strong abilities. But her go-to was to try and talk things out. She didn't want to fight. And I think that is really, really awesome. You don't see that a whole lot.
Yeah, we actually talked about that in an episode yesterday with Aquaman, because it's a similar thing. It's like really difficult. It's actually sometimes even more difficult to combat violence with non-violence. You know, like it takes a whole lot of strength to hold back that rage and anger and say, like, here's how we can come together peacefully. So that's really cool. I'm really interested in that now.
So the leader of the group is Caitlin Fairchild, and when her gen active powers activated, she shot up to about 6 feet tall, all of her clothes ripped off. So she's this huge, muscular, large-breasted, gorgeous girl, and Sarah has a thing for her. And so one of the other interesting things that this series did is when it comes out that she's gay, one of the other characters, my favorite character from the series, Roxy Spalding, who was Freefall, she struggles with it. She freaks out a little bit because she's worried that Sarah's going to hit on her, which is a reaction that a lot of people see. Yeah, it is. And she has to work through it and get over it and learn and grow. And that is not something that you get to see a lot. You know, Bobby Drake comes out and he is, he's outed. He wasn't even ready to. Jean did it for him. That was a horrible move. But anyway, but he's instantly accepted because nobody cares. Northstar, when he comes out, is immediately accepted. Nobody cares. Among his teammates anyway.
You don't really see so much yet.
Here's Sarah, and she comes out, and she gets met with opposition.
Yeah.
Roxy doesn't want to be alone in a room with her anymore, and it does provide this fantastic opportunity to grow as a character and to do better. And honestly, the only other instance I can think of that deals with the idea of addressing your own bigotry and electively choosing to do better is actually the X-Men run with Northstar and Bobby, where I so wanted them to fall in love. So Annie Gazakanian, who was a terrible character for the most part, had one good thing that she did. She was anti-mutant until her son developed mutant powers.
Right.
And she had to make the choice of, do I want to hate mutants or do I want to love my son? And the love of her son won.
So is that
And
supposed to be a mirror to homophobia, do you think?
oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the X-Men, and not just homophobia, like, that's one of the greatest things about the X-Men comics is they have perpetually, from the very beginning, been a very close parallel and allegory for homosexuality and also the civil rights movement. So you could very easily apply it to homophobia. You can very easily apply it to racism, and making the conscious decision of this is wrong. You know, my hate can't be stronger than my love, and choosing love. And
Yes, well said.
that was fantastic there. And then, it was hard for me to see Roxy behave like this, because I'm like, no, I don't want you to be this way. I want you to be open and accepting right
but
away.
But at the same time, like you're saying, it's important to see the flip sides of the coin, right?
And
like
just like it's important to have LGBT representation in comics, because it absolutely is. It is peer-reviewed, scientifically proven fact through social studies that representation in media has a significant recordable impact on the general population. So by portraying queers in these comics as these heroes, it helps to shape public perception. But just like it's important for us to see ourselves mirrored in a positive light, I think it's also important for people who are out there who have these issues with racism, who have this homophobia, these worries, these fears, these thoughts, well, I don't think I'm a racist, but I clutch my purse a little tighter when a black person walks past me, or I don't mind gay people, I just don't want to be hit on
room alone. Like,
it's important for them to see themselves reflected in these characters who stop and go, wait, this isn't right.
Yes,
this isn't how I want to behave.
Yep.
And they are able to see themselves reflected in that as well.
I love that. That is an excellent segue, actually, because I got some answers back from some cosplayers on Instagram. I just want to read some of their responses. So some of the questions I was asking, people of color that cosplay that are also gender non-conforming. I was saying things like, I'm wondering how you feel about the current POC and or gender sexually diverse representation in comics, either Marvel, DC, or independent. Did you have any good or bad character examples I should let our followers know about? How do you think, if at all, it has changed over the last few decades? So this answer back is from cx.cosplay. So that's at cx.cosplay on Instagram. I feel pretty good about the current diverse group of characters in comic books. We are seeing a lot more of minority characters jumping from comic books to the small screen, but it would be nice to see more of them make it to the big screen. Yes. So like Black Panther, I suppose. We have seen Marvel take the biggest leap as far as inclusion in the MCU, but it still falls short when it counted. For example, they hesitated when it came to green lighting Black Panther. Due to its majority black cast, it became one of their top grossing movies yet. Where was Black Panther really used in Infinity War or Endgame? Captain Marvel was supposed to be the badass of all badasses, yet I couldn't tell according to, so I think they were saying they're supposed to be the universe's savior according to Infinity War. My thing is, if you're going to set up a minority character, race, sex, or gender for greatness, then finish the job. I believe the industry is on a constant upward slope, which in turn has made an impact on real life. It's just sad that it takes make-believe to make real changes. So that was a really good quote. I've got some more, but I'll leave them for our next episode because we're coming up on 2 hours now. So I'll just say thank you so much to Ainsley for joining me today, because I had so much fun talking to you about this topic. This is, I think, a topic that's very near and dear to both of our hearts, that we're both very passionate about. So it was really nice to dissect it a little bit, even, just scratch the surface with someone that cares about this shit as much as I do. And you've given so many hours. By the way, not that any of us make money, but Ainsley and all the moderators, they all do this work for free. So they're basically giving us their time and hours and lives to help us grow I Freaking Love Comics, because they freaking love comics. And it's magical. We feel very grateful. Thank you so much, Ainsley, for being on. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with in terms of sign off?
No, just thank you. you all have just been absolutely incredible, so welcoming. It really is a group for everyone. Everyone
Safe
is
space.
welcome.
Yep.
Absolutely, it's so positive. Yeah, just you all are incredible, and it is my privilege to be a part of this group. Thank you
I
so
feel
much.
the exact same way. Thank you so much. So people that don't already follow us on Facebook, we're on Twitter, Instagram, all the good shit. We're also on Patreon. So patreon.com// I freaking love comics. Yeah, that's it. So if you can give even $3 a month, that would super help us out. It means we can start, getting cool things that we've got in the works, like merchandise, stickers, bookmarks, hoodies, t-shirts. So if you want to see more of that, go to iflcomics.com. And we do live streams and podcasts each weekend. So we've always got new content coming out. Please check out some of our other videos. The Facebook groups are great if you want to see the stuff that Ainsley's posting about, LGBT month, the Black History Month. We'll always have cool stuff going up because of people like Ainsley. So come check us out on Facebook, join in the fun. It was really great talking to you today, Ainsley, and I will hopefully see you in the chat. Peace.
Live